Welcome to Speed versus Savings. Do you need a car? This is one of several webinars that we have created through the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar series, which is done in collaboration with several universities across the state of Illinois. So University of Illinois Extension out of University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, as well as the University of Illinois Systems Student Money Management Center, North Park University, National Louis University, and Loyola have collaborated on programs for this particular academic year's webinar series. This is the second webinar in the series for 2019-2020. My name is Andrea Pellegrini. I am the Assistant Director of University Student Financial Services and Cashier Operations, and I run the Student Money Management Center for the entire University of Illinois system. Today I am in Urbana, but yesterday I was in Springfield, and sometimes I'm also in Chicago. Never at the same time, but I travel a lot. And Flora, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Flor Caraves and I am a student success coach for the undergraduate college at National Louis University. I'm so excited.
Yay! So Flora and I are very excited about today's content. We want to know where everyone is logging in from today. So if you can put the state and or the county that you're logging in from today, that would be really helpful. Or if you're not sure what county you're in, if you can say what city and state you're in, that would be great. We've had people from even Canada join us, which is really fun. Someone from Minnesota, lots of Minnesota people today. That's great. Chicago, Champaign, Illinois, lots of Illinois and Minnesota, Kankakee, Illinois. This is fabulous. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Flora to talk about our objectives.
Yes, all right. So today we're going to go over understanding the true cost of vehicle ownership. So there's many different components that go into the true cost. Recognizing the general process of purchasing a car, comparing the costs and benefits of car sharing, so that's Uber and Lyft, leasing and owning a vehicle. Leasing has become very popular within the last couple of years. We'll also identify different tools, some that are more high-key because Andrea and myself have used them to help throughout the car purchasing process. And then we're hoping that you'll also be able to know where to go if you recognize a potential fraud or scam. All right, so in the chat, what are some benefits of owning a car? If you all could drop it in the chat, I want to know what everyone's thinking. What are some benefits? All right, so we have Scott, being able to go where you want, when you want. Yes, definitely convenient. Setting your own schedule for sure. Get to and from work. Yes, Seisha, OMG. Yeah, I know for me, one of the benefits is that I live in Indiana and we don't have public transportation, so I wouldn't be able to get from my house to my train station without driving. It's too far for me to walk, so. Yes, all right, I think we can move forward, but you all can keep putting stuff in the chat. So some of the things that Andrea and I had compiled are convenience, which some of you mentioned in the chat. I used to drive Uber and Lyft, so it was another form of income for myself. Safety and security could be a huge component depending on your time frame of work, your commuting, and the area that you live in or you work in, traveling, so you can have fun traveling, doing some road trips, putting your pony with you in the road trip, right, Andrea? So yeah, those are definitely some benefits. So we can move it along.
My Greyhound pony loves road trips.
Yes. All right, so Andrea made this beautiful little tree here that can help you decide whether your car is a need or a want. So we would start off with if you already own a car and then move along with your decisions. It's really important that we decide on whether it's a need or a want, and you'll see why when we move forward when we're talking about the costs. All right, so cost of ownership. All right, so at this very moment, if you can put in the chat, who thinks at this very second that you can afford to own a car? Okay, we have a few yeses. Oh, we got a nope, not me. Well, that's real. All right, it looks like we have mostly yeses. Let's see if that changes or not. All right, so some of the costs that we should be considering when you're thinking about purchasing a car are the total cost of the car, financing and interest, the maintenance, because you have to keep your car clean, especially if you live in the Midwest where there's snow and salt. You need to make sure that you washed your car, especially the bottom of it. Repairs, like if you get a flat, you need oil changes, things of that nature. Gas can be very expensive. Tolls, parking, especially if you're in the city areas. Taxes and registration are also a huge component. Okay, so if you're thinking about, I don't know, like maybe it's okay for me to take the bus, but I kind of want a car because it's more convenient. Some of the things you should be considering when comparing the costs are the interest, depreciation, insurance, gas, maintenance, license, registration, taxes. If you live in the city or in an area where you need a city sticker, that's also a big expense, and parking. If you're not driving, you might be riding a bike or rollerblading, or if you don't own any of those things, you might want to consider how much that would cost. The maintenance of your bike, how much it costs to take a bus or the train. Like myself, I pay almost $200 a month to take the South Shoreline from Indiana to Chicago. If you take a taxi, how much can that cost per day, or however often you have to take the taxi? Your Uber and Lyfts, especially if there's a surge, those can be pretty pricey as well. So here we have some compiled numerical comparisons, and this is provided by the calculator from bicycleuniverse.com. So as you can see, the difference between the total cost of driving for 5 years and the total cost of not driving for 5 years is about 38 grand per year. So that can be a huge significant factor. And then for 1 year, it looks like it's about almost $8,000 of a difference. So depending on your budget, this is something that you should definitely consider if it's going to be healthy for your spending plan or not. Okay, so some of you may or may not know what depreciation is. I know in my personal experience, when I bought my car, I was like, oh, well, I have a Jeep Patriot. So I'm like, well, Jeep is a pretty good brand. They don't lose value as quickly as other cars, but it actually depreciated really fast. So depreciation is the reduction in value of an asset, which would be your vehicle, with the passage of time. So this is due to wear and tear because you're using it. Whatever you paid for or your loan is for when you're leaving the lot is not where your car is going to be worth after you leave the lot. So we mentioned some calculators in the beginning of our session. So when you're calculating the cost of ownership, you will want to jot down the calculators that we have on the chat. They'll go over financing, insurance. Definitely look into the parking and the tolls in your area, especially in Chicago. Parking can be pretty expensive. We do have some apps that we'll mention later, like Spot Hero, that you can use to see what parking amounts are friendly for your budget. Driving can definitely be a factor in pricing because of gas, mileage, things of that nature, and then maintenance and repairs. All right, so I don't know how many of you were live with us when we were doing the Spooked by Spending plans, but if you didn't get a chance to participate, we have the link in the chat. I definitely recommend it. The Spooked by Spending plan will show you how to create a spending plan, and you're definitely going to need one if you're considering purchasing a car, because you need to know if you can afford it. So some of the things that you should be considering in your budget would be the fixed expenses, which are your car payment, unless you're paying it completely in cash, Your insurance, so your insurance can vary depending on if you decide to move forward with a monthly payment or a payment of every 6 months, or if you're just going to plot everything down for the entire year. Flexible expenses can be your fuel and gas, parking, and your tolls. So your parking can be fixed if you decide to move forward with, like over here in downtown, we have a monthly parking payment that we can do. So that would make it a fixed expense. With your tolls, if you have like an iPass, they can be taking out $20 every 2 weeks, depending on how often you go through the tolls, and then occasional expenses such as your maintenance and repairs. This will also impact your budget because we need to make sure that we know how much your income is. Are you living off of your loans? Do you have a job with a salary? Do you get support from the government or from your parents? What are your other expenses? Do you have to pay for groceries? Do you have cable? Do you have Netflix? All the other things that you're paying for also have to be considered. All right, so what are some tools or apps that you already use to manage your budget? Or if you have a car, what are some of the apps that you use to see maybe like how much gas is in your area? How do you manage your costs? What kind of apps do you guys use? I want to see them in the chat. I know earlier I mentioned that I use Gas Buddy. Yes, we have a Gas Buddy in there. And I think, Andrea, you said you use Gas Buddy as well. I know you drive a lot.
I love Gas Buddy, especially if I am on a road trip and I don't know the area as well, because then you can see on a map how close is the nearest gas station and how much would it cost to like go 3 more miles. So
Yeah.
that's really, really helpful.
For sure. Yeah, I use this app called Get Upside, and I like it because it gives you money back on whatever gas you use. So it's only compatible with some gas stations, but you do get money back on like some cents per gallon or whatever. Oh, Waze is awesome. Yes, Lisa, I love Waze.
Station mentioned Spot Hero. I
Yeah,
really love Spot Hero, especially when I'm traveling to Chicago.
yeah, Spot Hero is clutch down here. All right, you guys can keep putting it in the chat, but we're gonna continue for the interest of time. Terminology, everyone's favorite section. All right, so we mentioned a little earlier that leasing has become very popular lately. So for those of you that might not know what that is, a vehicle lease is when you pay for the use of a vehicle during a specific period of time, which often can cost less than buying, but you don't actually own the car. So some people have been doing like a lease to own. So you'll do a lease for a couple of years, and then whatever you've paid towards it, at the end of your lease term, if you decide, actually, you know what, I do want to keep this car, then you would move forward with the paperwork to get it into a loan. Warranty, so important. So warranty is a written guarantee issued to the purchaser of an article by its manufacturer promising to repair or replace it if necessary within a specified period of time. An example, which is now funny, but it wasn't when it happened, of this is that I purchased my vehicle brand new. So I had full warranty from the dealership and from the manufacturer, which is Jeep. I purchased my vehicle in 2016 in April, and I parked in the parking lot of the train station. When I got home, when I got to the train station from work, I found my Jeep on crates. So someone stole all my tires. And I have a special edition of that Patriot. So the tires were of that same edition. Luckily, because of the warranty, I didn't end up having to pay for the rims or the tires or any of that. It was a huge mess, but luckily I didn't have to come out of pocket for it. So there's an example. Yes, I am lucky. All right, so the difference between the manufacturer warranty versus the extended warranty is the manufacturer's warranty can vary widely in terms and length. So these are the things that when you're purchasing your car through the dealership, you want to make sure you're paying attention when the dealer is going through the terms. Compare the terms and pay attention to what's not covered. So in my experience, I could have chosen to have warranty on like my windows and like some of the interior stuff. And right now I don't remember if I added that or not. I don't think so though. The extended warranty may be sold at the time of the vehicle sale or as a manufacturer warranty expires. So right now, my warranty is about to expire and I've been getting millions and millions of calls about extending it. Like you can extend it for another 10 years or whatever, and they'll give you the price for that per year. The warranty may cover mechanical or electrical problems. So especially with these newer vehicles, with the windows, you might want to get some warranty on the electrical parts. It may or may not be covered. So make sure that you're paying attention to those terms. Service contract. So the service contract is a business agreement between the contractor and the customer covering the maintenance and servicing of equipment over a specified period. Luckily, my dealership also has a partnership with an auto body shop. So the year after my tires were stolen, I was in an accident where the other person ran the red light and I needed some work to be done on my door. And because of my service contract, I also didn't have to come out of pocket for that because my dealership had included that in my service contract. So I just took it to the dealership, they took it to the auto body shop, they fixed my door, and I didn't have to pay anything. Yay me. Okay, so this one can get a little tricky because they go hand in hand. So the title and the registration go hand in hand because in order for you to receive your license plate, you need to register your vehicle and pay the appropriate fees. Your registration will require your title, which is your proof of ownership, in order for you to pay the fees and get your license plate sticker, so on and so on. Another thing to consider with these costs and the titles and registrations is that I know in Chicago, you also need to pay for your city sticker. In Indiana, we don't, but you will be required to bring in your title and registration for your city sticker. I hope that makes sense.
I think it's also important, since we have people from different states and cities, that you may have to take your car in for emissions tests, depending on where you live. And that's usually tied to your registration, which is typically an annual cost, but depending on where you live, it might be every 5 years or it might be biannually. So really know where you live or where you're intending to register your vehicle and what the costs are associated with that.
Yeah, that's true. In Indiana, we don't have to do the emissions test unless your car, like it depends on the year of your car, like how old it is. So I haven't had to do one yet. But my partner, his Jeep is a 2008, and he had to do his first emissions test this year. Good point, good point. All right, so there is a difference between a private sale and third-party sales. So a private sale would be if you're going through like Craigslist or something and you find someone that is selling their car. So this would be from owner to owner. Something to keep in mind would be that one, you probably shouldn't go by yourself, and two, your location, your meetup spot to do the transactions should be in the bank or a bank, just to make sure that everything is legitimate. So the seller should provide a clean title and a complete bill of sale. The title transfer with the buyer as well. The buyer needs to pay the title and registration and pay the taxes that you would need to file as well, depending on the market value. So those are some things that you need to consider when purchasing, especially if you're purchasing out of state. I know that when we bought our first vehicle from owner to owner, we went to Ohio to do it, so we had to do a little extra research for that. This is the section that Andrea and myself love, right, Andrea?
Yes, love S.M.A.R.T goals. It's the
Yeah.
best.
All right, so let's get to it. All right, so for those of you that might not be familiar with the acronym S.M.A.R.T goals, so the acronym S.M.A.R.T stands for specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and timely. This is a section that we also go over in the Spooked by Spending Plans webinar, so I highly recommend that you take a look at it. We also provide in that webinar different ways of creating your S.M.A.R.T goals. So when you're creating your goals, you want to make sure that you're also including the timing and that you're realistic with that timing. So we have immediate, short-term, midterm, and long-term goals. So immediate is something that you feel is feasible within a few weeks. So that would be something like your rent. Short-term would be within the next 5 years. So that could be taking a vacation. So I work at a university, so with my freshmen, this would be something that they could consider like their graduation gift to themselves. Midterm would be within 5 to 10 years, so that would be like buying a car if you're considering that you maybe don't need it right now, but you might need it later. And then long-term would be more than 10 years, which is something like retirement for those of you that are like the millennial age. All right, so here's an example goal. I want to have a 10% down payment towards a new Subaru Outback in 1 year by November 2020. That's a cool visual. So this is how the S.M.A.R.T goal would function. So the current dates would be November 14th of 2019, and the goal is to have 10% of the down payment on the new 2020 Subaru Outback. So the total that I need is $4,000. The target date is November 2020. The amount needed per month would be a little over $300 a month, or about $77 a week. So that's something that I would have to look at my spending plan to see if it's feasible for that year. Another thing to consider when thinking about auto loans, purchasing from the dealership and whatnot, is the compound interest comparison. So as you can see here in this lovely graph, thanks Andrea, is the difference between the 72-month term, so that's about 6 years, the 60-month term, which is about 5 years, and then 36-month, which is about 3 years. So the dark green is your principal balance, so that's the amount that you borrowed when you initiated the loan, and then how much that goes up by because of the interest. So that's a huge chunk. That's a really huge chunk. So as you can see here, the shorter the term of your loan, the less you're gonna pay in the long run. And don't forget your monthly costs. So we talked about earlier your maintenance. Your car payment may or may not change with the interest. Your insurance may or may not change depending on if you get into an accident, knocking on wood. Gas can fluctuate as well, but these are some estimates. License, registration, and taxes, and then your parking. So the total cost per month can be around a little over $1,000, and then your annual cost can be a little over $12,000. Keep in mind also that your insurance also depends on the type of car that you get. And now to Andrea.
Tell us my turn.
Yes.
We're gonna talk about the purchasing process because it can be kind of crazy. So how would you describe the process of purchasing a car? Like, let's say someone's never bought a car before and they're like, how do I buy a car? Seisha says it's too long, confusing, and intimidating. We have a lot of feelings here, a lot of feelings. It's an emotional time to purchase something as big as a car. I hate it. These are some great reactions. Fun and exciting if you do your research and set your boundaries. I agree with Lisa. I like buying cars. I don't like doing it often, but I do like when it comes around. I never want to purchase a car ever again. Test driving is so much fun. Lisa and I are on the same boat. I love test driving cars. I also love trolling some whack dealers. That's my favorite. Okay, so it's an emotional time. We've clearly established that. So let's talk about kind of the logistics of it a little bit more generally. So obviously you want to do your research first. You want to research what models exist, what features that you care about or need based on what your driving is going to be like. If you're going to do a lot of off-roading, you're going to want something with four-wheel drive. If you live in the Midwest where we have snow and inclement weather, you might consider a front-wheel drive car or an all-wheel drive car so you can get through those snowy times. For those of you that don't know, a rear-wheel drive car, unless you have a lot of weight on the back end of the car, is not going to do very well in icy conditions. So if you weren't familiar with that, that would be something to consider, especially in Illinois or Minnesota or Indiana, where you have snow sometimes. You also want to consider what the costs are. We've talked a lot about the true cost of ownership, not just how much is the monthly payment on the car note or how much is insurance, but all those little hidden costs that you don't necessarily think about. You also want to research what the benefits are to owning a car as well as maybe leasing a car. If you like to buy a new car pretty regularly, you might look at the cost differences between leasing and owning and seeing if it makes more sense for you to lease rather than finance a car every 3 years or 2 years or whatever. You also want to make sure that you are comparing used versus new. We've talked about depreciation, and that's a big component of why some people prefer only to buy used cars. Some people like the peace of mind with a warranty. You also want to consider the terms of different loans. So different lenders are going to give you different terms depending on your credit worthiness and what you have to offer. And so you can do some research before you actually ever fill out an application to see what the terms of those loans are and do that comparison. You don't have to rely on a dealer telling you what you qualify for. You can do that research ahead of time, and that can really help you throughout the car buying process. It's very empowering to have that research already done. And then usually you have the closing part of the process. You do some test drives, you negotiate the details of how much you're willing to pay, as well as maybe what financing that the dealership can offer you or the lenders that you've already reached out to can offer you, and then you have to complete the paperwork. I do not love the paperwork, partially because sometimes sellers can be kind of pushy with that, and we'll talk about ways that you can help protect yourself during the paperwork process, because that's where they hide things sometimes or things get messed up. So it's really important to pay attention to that paperwork piece during the car buying process. All right, so part of the reason that driving costs have gone up is because of the cost of financing, which is a very important part of the car buying process. Most people have to borrow. They can't just drop $40,000 on a new car, especially when we're young, right? We don't have the assets to be able to do that quite yet. But one of the reasons why financing costs overall have gone up and contributed to the increase in driving costs is because more people are taking advantage of longer term loans, in which we talked about with the compounding interest comparison. Is the longer the term of your loan, the more you pay in interest, and that increases the overall cost of driving. So that's really important for you to consider when you're looking at your overall costs of owning a car. There are two types of financing, which I kind of alluded to. You might have lenders through banks, credit unions, or an auto finance company that's not a bank or credit union. They all can offer you auto loans. Or you might have a dealer arranged auto loan where the dealer takes all your information and forwards it to one or several lenders. They might have, maybe they do a program with the manufacturer. The manufacturer might have a lender or a lending option to provide you, or they might work with local banks and credit unions or auto finance companies to kind of shop around for you on your behalf. Personally, I'm going to show my bias a little bit. I think you should do the research before you go into a dealer arranged situation so that they don't tell you something that is incorrect. If you know what your credit worthiness is, or generally how good your credit is, you can tell what you should qualify for based on what you know about your own credit worthiness. And that's really important to know when you're looking at that paperwork. So when it comes to negotiation and considering all these different ways to pay for a car, you want to know what your resources are. If you have cash to offer or how good your credit is, those are important things to consider. If you have a cosigner or if you don't need a cosigner, those are things that can help you. If you need a cosigner, that might limit what your options are for financing, or how you can make a deal with the dealership or with the seller. Cash also is typically better if you're doing third-party sales, but you definitely want to make the transaction typically at like a financial institution or somewhere in a public space, because that can be kind of scary, especially if you're buying a bigger car, a newer car that costs a little bit more. How much you can offer for the down payment is really important to know, and what you can negotiate. Whether or not you're pre-approved for financing already can be helpful, and how much a trade-in is worth. There's lots of tools like that you can use to look up the value of your trade-in. So they might lowball you on what they'll offer for your 1999 Saturn SC2. I might have had one. And it's important to know what the value is for a trade-in for your car if you're going to use that in the negotiation process. All right, let's talk about some tools. We love to talk about tools because it's very important to your research process. So calculators are obviously super helpful when it comes to comparing different costs, but there can be some different tools that you can use to compare features across different types of vehicles. We've put a few examples in the chat as well. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission both have resources that can help you during the car buying process as well. There's a worksheet and there's a site that you can look at. There's stuff on used cars and new cars. We also put in the chat, or going to put in the chat, something called powerpay.org that can help you manage lots of different types of debt. So that's really helpful if you already have a car and you have to buy a second car maybe, and you have student loans. Kind of managing all those different debt repayments can be challenging. So having a tool like that can help you prioritize so you can pay everything off sooner. There's also auto loan calculators that can help you compare rates. It's also important to look at what the terms are, so knowing the different terms or what to look for in the terms situation. I know it's really fine print and I know it's hard to get through sometimes, but knowing how much your annual percentage rate would be, if there's any additional front end origination fees, if there's any balloon payments that you have to pay attention to, those are things that you want to look at when it comes to looking at the terms. And you also want to use calculators so you can look at opportunity for savings and to estimate how much the costs are going to be overall. I know we keep talking about the true cost of ownership, but that's really important to remember when you are budgeting for owning a car. Another very, very important tool is knowing your credit worthiness. So the only place that you can go to get all 3 of your credit bureau histories at once every 12 months is annualcreditreport.com. It does not provide a credit score, but there's hundreds of different scores that an auto lender can pull from. So it's more important that you make sure that whatever data that they're pulling to create those scores is accurate. And annualcreditreport.com can give you your credit reports with all your credit history, and you can also verify that that information is accurate. And if it's not, you can ask them to investigate it and submit some changes to be made based on what you can prove is your debt repayment obligation, for instance. You can learn more about credit and creditworthiness and how to establish healthy credit with our recording on Establish Healthy Credit, which is on YouTube, and we also put it in a Moodle course, which you can check out as well. And we put links to that in the chat. So we're back to the chat. What tools do you guys use when buying a car? We only talked about a few, so there's plenty of other tools that might be in existence that you use. Ooh, someone said that there's a flow sheet called how much car can you afford from AARP. That's great. Let's see if there's anything else that people put in here that I missed out on. Oh, Kelly Blue Book, yes. NADA, Consumer Reports, lots of different tools that you can use when buying a car. Edmunds is something that I use. It's a kind of a consumer database of different cars and features and costs, and they have a lot of calculator tools that can be really helpful, especially if you're comparing different features and all that kind of stuff. All right, excellent. So you can keep adding in the chat if you want. So let's talk about auto insurance. One of those costs that can vary drastically, but is very much needed if you're going to be driving a car at all. So full coverage is the type of insurance that has all types of coverage. It has all 3 of the different types of coverage within it. So it includes liability, which protects you if you or if another person driving your car with your permission injures or kills someone or damages property. It also includes collision coverage, which covers damage to your own vehicle in an accident, even if the accident is your fault. And then comprehensive, which covers losses other than collision, like fire damage, break-ins, vandalism, theft, natural disasters like floods. If you live in a flood area, that might be on there as well. And it's important to know that there are deductibles associated with all types of insurance coverage, but that can vary. So that deductible is the amount of insurance claim that you have to pay before the insurance company pays the balance that's owed. And there are limits that you need to consider when you're looking at different insurance options as well. So there are 2 types of coverage with deductibles, and the amount that you pay for them will vary based on how often that these things can occur. So if a collision occurs, your car collides with maybe another car, maybe a tree, maybe a telephone pole, that would be collision coverage. And then the comprehensive coverage covers things like birds, you run into a bird or a deer or other animals. In Illinois, it might be really popular, or it's common for people to run into deer. I almost ran into a deer yesterday when I was on the Springfield campus. It's a huge buck. It was crazy. I wasn't going very fast, so it was easy to to slow down. But it's hard when you're on the interstate and they just run out in front of you. It might also cover fire or theft or a windstorm. So it's important to know what those differences are when you're looking for insurance and kind of comparing what your options are. In the state of Illinois, there are certain minimums of coverage that are needed. So you have to maintain a minimum amount of at least $25,000 per person for other people, not you, $50,000 per accident, and $20,000 in property damage. Though these minimums may not be enough to cover the cost of an accident or a cost of property damage or medical care for someone that gets in an accident with you. But these are the Illinois state minimums. You need to look at what is your liability, what you can cover out of pocket as far as your deductibles go, what are the minimums for where you live, and you also might want to consider if you can bundle it with other types of insurance. And you can learn more about insurance with our Cover Your Assets recording as well. I know we're linking to a lot of outside stuff, but auto loans and buying a car just relies on so many different aspects of your financial well-being, which is why we're linking to other important resources. So let's talk about how to steer clear of fraud and scams, which are very prevalent in the car bearing process at lots of places. So if you're buying a car, you want to read reviews for the places that you're looking at buying a car from several locations. Like, you don't want to just look at the dealership's reviews on their website. You might want to look at Yelp or Google or Yahoo or the Better Business Bureau and see what people are saying across multiple locations. You might, especially if you're trying to buy a car off of Craigslist, do a reverse image search. Craigslist scams are very popular. I almost fell for one when I was trying to buy my last car. They tend to not provide a whole lot of information, so you have to reach out to them individually. And they usually try to use sob stories, so you don't want to fall for sob stories. The one that I almost fell for was someone who claimed that her late husband bought the car and then died immediately afterwards, and she put it in storage, and so it doesn't have any miles on it, and I would just need to send a down payment and they could ship the car to me. And I said, well, I don't fall for scams, but that was sad. And I almost fell for it if it wasn't for knowing that sob stories were used so frequently in Craigslist scams. You might also want to use Google quotes on the description, because what some scam artists will do is they will list the same car with the same information in multiple places across the nation. But you can use Google quotes on like a snippet of the description to determine where else that specific description is showing up. And that might be helpful. You also want to consider taking it to a mechanic, whether it's from a dealer, whether it's from a third party. A big red flag about the legitimacy of what's going on with the car is whether or not they will allow you to take it to mechanic. Any legit dealer or even third party seller is going to allow you to take it to mechanic to check it out. You might also want to check what the odometer says compared to other features of wear and tear on the car. So you might want to look at if the car says that it has 50,000 miles, but it has so much rust that it looks like it's been out for a long time in the elements or has been driven a lot. That might be a red flag that they've changed the odometer. You might want to take a longer test drive. If someone doesn't allow you to take a longer test drive to really simulate what it's like to drive in real conditions, that might be a red flag not to buy that car. So that's something to pay attention to as well. Take it out on the interstate. Make sure that you drive it the way that you would normally. even if it's might be a little uncomfortable for the person that's selling the car. It's, if you're going to buy the car, you want to put it through its paces. You want to make sure to check the vehicle's history. I know we didn't talk about it, but there's several places that you can check your vehicle history. I think Carfax is really popular, but there's other ones that the Federal Trade Commission and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has pointed out that you can use as well. And you also want to make sure that the VIN matches whatever paperwork is being provided or the description that is being used to sell it. You also want to be willing to walk away. It's like we said at the beginning of this conversation, it can be an emotional roller coaster to buy a car. And so you get invested, especially when you fall in love with a car, but you still need to be willing to walk away so you can protect yourself. So when it comes to the financing process, there are a few things that I really want to stress. I bought a car and the dealer tried to hide a cost for me in the paperwork, even after I told them that I was a financial educator. And you could tell that they were uncomfortable with me taking time to read all the fine print. And I skimmed some of the fine print because I had read through those kinds of contracts before and kind of knew what it was saying. But I noticed that the math didn't add up on one of the sheets. And they were trying to hide a service contract in the cost of the financing, and then lied to me and told me that my credit union would have charged me more money if I didn't buy this service contract from them. I'm going to leave it there because I get emotional about it because, like I said, the car buying process can be very emotional. Needless to we are woosawing. It's okay to bring a calculator. Don't let people push you. Make sure to check the numbers. If you're not comfortable with math, remember, you can bring a calculator. It's not that hard. It's fine. Don't feel like you need to be rushed. And if you feel like they are rushing you, remember that you can walk away. You don't have to be there.
We should have added a stress ball.
We should have added a stress ball.
Next time.
You're so right, Floor. So let's talk about lemon laws in Illinois. The lemon laws differ by state, and so your state might have different lemon laws, but in Illinois, in order to be covered by the Illinois lemon law, a new vehicle, must have a nonconformity that both substantially impairs the use, market value, or safety of the vehicle and is not repairable by the dealer or manufacturer in at least 4 attempts for the same exact repair, or be out of service for a total of 30 or more business days. And we lifted that directly from the law, which we'll put in the chat as well. The lemon law does not cover used cars, altered or modified vehicles, or motorcycles and boats. So it only covers new cars and is very particular on what it will cover. So just be mindful of that. If you run into an issue where you feel like a dealer or a seller has sold you a faulty car, is the law only protects you so much. All right, where would you report vehicle scams and fraud if you ran across it?
I would just call you.
So, I mean, that's fair. That's fair, Floor. When I ran into the issue with the dealership that tried to hide information from me and then tried to lie to me, I did report them to the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and I also let the credit union that they were misrepresenting know, and I actually got the most response from the credit union that I told them they were being misrepresented. So I'm not sure that the Federal Trade Commission or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was able to do anything from what I provided, because immediately after the business manager noticed that I recognized they were doing something illegal, they shredded the paperwork. I was in so much shock I couldn't even stop him. So the evidence had been gone, but Anyway, Better Business Bureau, the California Department of Consumer Affairs, it's the CFPB and FTC. I agree. I think it's good to get local law enforcement or local consumer affairs enforcement involved as well. One thing that I wish I would have done with my situation was to call the local police and make a police report, just so it was on record. So excellent, excellent responses. So like I said, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, you can file a complaint with. Federal Trade Commission, you can file a complaint with them. You can even use the Consumer Complaint FAQ guide. They have them even for online fraud and scams that you just notice and aren't a victim of. So even if you notice it, it's good to report it. Local police, and in my case, I also contacted the misrepresented businesses that were involved with my scam case. You can learn more about identity theft and fraud and how to protect yourself more generally with a webinar we already did on that. So all kinds of resources that you're getting access to today. So let's talk about how to create your car buying plan. You want to obviously determine if it's a need or a want. You want to assess what resources that you have available to you in order to purchase the car. You want to do your research both on the type of car or the features that you want and the types of financial tools that you have access to or you might want to use. You want to set a SMART goal. We talked about that. You want to make a plan that will help you reach your SMART goal. You want to make sure to get your credit in order. You might want to do that even before you set a SMART goal. That might be part of your SMART goal. Get your credit in order, make sure it's good. You want to drive before you buy if possible. I know it's sometimes possible to buy off the internet without ever driving and they deliver it to your house. Make sure to read the fine print on what your options are if you don't like it or if it's not exactly as it was described. You want to compare the terms and read the fine print on the paperwork, and remember to not feel pressured. You don't have to buy a car just because you have gone through the process. All right, so if you want to take a step towards earning the spending badge, you can complete our speed versus savings quiz if you are a University of Illinois student. We are currently working on making sure that people without a University of Illinois net ID and password can get credit towards the badges program. We ran into some technical issues, but we were working through them, and we will make sure to send that out as soon as we get it figured out. But you can take a look at what resources we have available in the quiz as well. Our next webinar is on February 27th of 2020 at noon, and it's how to save money on travel, and it will be during America Saves Week. So we're all about saving money that week. We'll stay on for a little bit, but please feel free to stay in contact with us and ask us any questions in the chat that you might have. And thank you for joining us today. We're not going to keep you on if you have other things to do, you have lunch to go get, you have class to get to, whatever the case might be, but please feel free to stay on. Thank you, Lisa, for being so good on the chat.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, Andrea.
I love it. For everyone here, I love cars. I love it. Flora already knows, love cars, love test driving cars. I love driving cars. I love taking pictures of cars. I love making all these little car icons for this webinar today. I'm just so excited about cars.
Yeah, you definitely did your part with the Back to the Future car.
I did. We want to see it again, don't we?
Yes.
I'm going to go back to the Back to the Future car. If you guys missed it.
And I love the Jeep one. I'm a Jeep fan, so.
Where did I put it? So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the chat. There's our Back to the Future DeLorean. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to scroll up and see if I missed anything good because you guys were doing so great in the chat today.
There was one question, I think it was from Steve. It prompted a lot of conversation about, so it looks like he paid cash for his last car.
Okay.
And for some reason on his credit report, it pulled up that the dealership had ran his credit.
Okay, yeah. So I also paid cash for my last car, and in part of the paperwork, because they have to make sure that the cash is legit, I paid with a check. So, but I had the cash in my bank, but they had me fill out a preliminary lending form, and they had to run my credit in order to see if I qualified for the lending before they would process the paperwork. And that was basically so that they were covered in case my check bounced. And I'm not sure if Steve, you paid with cash or like actual physical cash or with a check. But if you paid with a check, they need to make sure that the money actually goes into the account. And it's a way, yeah, if it was a check, that's pretty standard. Because I was like, what do you mean I have to do this lending thing? What do you mean you have to run my credit? No, I don't appreciate this, but I'm going to have to do it because I didn't bring physical cash with me. Yeah, so that's an excellent question, but that's pretty standard, and it was probably part of the paperwork. They probably should have done a better job of disclosing that to you. So I think what we've learned here is make sure to ask the questions whether or not you're paying with cash or with credit, just so people know what they're getting into and what might show up on their credit, right? And even though, like some people might argue that it should have been a soft pull that wouldn't have affected your credit worthiness, but because you're technically seeking out the purchase of the car, it's considered a consumer hard pull against your credit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some people prefer only to do third party or private sales because you don't have that kind of situation, right? A private seller isn't going to pull your credit. You go to the bank and you say, here's the money.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever bought a car, even with private sale, at a physical bank, but it's usually always in a public space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So excellent question. Will the chat be emailed out? We don't usually email out the chat because some people ask more personal questions and names are associated with them, but we do put all of the links that we provide in our follow-up email that we'll send out probably sometime next week or the following week, since next week's kind of busy. It might be right before Thanksgiving. Yes, the links will be mailed out. Don't worry about that. We're also going to convert all the content into an online course in Moodle, so you can check out all these different resources. And then if we find new resources, like a good resource on AARP was shared in the chat, we might also include that in the updated content once we get that put up. All right. Any other questions? All right, I think we're going to close it down. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone that was able to join us and contribute in the chat and ask us really good questions. And we hope it was valuable for you to spend your lunchtime with us today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.